Support for this podcast has been provided by AllianceBernstein Investment Management and Research, making money meaningful.
Whereas Israelis are much more results driven, no one cares about how they look like. They would usually, wear sandals to work. They would probably stink a bit more than the average American. They don't care about how they look like or how they're being perceived. They care about, getting things done. And, if it's making money, if it's, closing the deal, if it's selling their company, that's what they care about. And they'll do everything that they can to get to that.
This is Startup Stories from the Startup Nation. My name is Yigal Marcus. Thank you for joining us. In this podcast, we'll meet the entrepreneurs who have personified the economic miracle known as the Startup Nation, the State of Israel. We'll learn about the culture which helped incubate them and their ideas. We'll learn of their successes and, of course, their failures. And we'll explore why it is that Israel develops some of the leading innovators of our time. Last summer, my wife and I decided to take a family vacation to Italy. So I opened my laptop and surfed the web for the best airline fares to Rome. We spent a few days considering our various flight options, but what was interesting was that every time I used my laptop, or my iPad, or my iPhone, banner ads featuring flights to Rome were consistently displayed across all of these devices. I actually found it very effective and helpful, and it actually kept the trip top of mind. And at the end of the day, I got a pretty good deal. It turns out that cross-device marketing is a strategy that consumer brands invest heavily in. In fact, 84% of marketers feel that a comprehensive cross-device marketing strategy is essential for success, but the problem is that only 20% feel very confident that they are serving the right message on the right device to the right person. And that's where device mapping comes into play, trying to figure out what devices are owned and operated by who. And with the average household having almost 6 connected devices, device mapping becomes critical to the marketer. And that's where a company called Crosswise comes into the picture. Founded by Jonathan Seidner, Steve Glanz, and Ron Reiter, Crosswise has become a massive device mapping database which fuels cross-device marketing to levels never seen before. And boy, has it worked. With me today is Ron Reiter, the co-founder and the former VP of R&D for Crosswise. Prior to Crosswise, Ron served in the Elite Intelligence Unit 8200 for the Israel Defense Forces, and he worked in the fields of web security and operating systems. After the Army, he worked in several high-tech jobs and then received a BS in computer science from IDC in 2013, and it was then that he helped co-found Crosswise. Ron specializes in web architecture, web development, and big data systems and security. He's actually also a mentor at the Google campus in Tel Aviv, and he helps startups choose the right high-tech architecture for their products. Today, Ron, after selling the company to Oracle, serves as a senior director of engineering at Oracle at its beautiful development center in Israel, which is actually where we are recording today's interview. Before we get to Crosswise, Ron, I want to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, where were you born?
Israel.
Israel. Where in Israel?
Near Haifa Rambam Hospital. But I did move to the Galilee, the Western Galilee, eventually. A place called Misgav. It's a very nice green place with awesome people. So that was a nice, fun childhood. I did live in the U.S. for a couple of years.
Really? How old were you then?
I was 12, 13-ish.
And you were there for what reason?
So yeah, my dad works in a place called Rafael, which is the kind of a
the defense contractor.
Yeah, exactly.
So he was a technologist.
He's still a programmer. His electrical engineering turned into a programmer because when he studied electrical engineering, there was no such thing really as programming. So yeah, that's how he kind of got into the field of programming, and I kind of eventually learned from him. I saw some friends of mine, like friends of my brothers, actually start program, and I was enchanted. I was like, I was shocked by how awesome it is. And
How old
he
were
picked
you?
that up.
How old were you when you first started learning?
I think 9.
9 years old.
Yeah.
And you learned by yourself, or you learned?
So yeah, my dad I discovered that I wanted to do it, so he kind of like took me in and started to teach me. So that's how it started, and I think since then, like all my childhood was mostly like just experimenting with programming.
Do you remember the first thing that you programmed?
Well, yeah, I do.
There you go. What was it?
It's in BASIC. It's a scene of the moon. It's just something that renders a scene of how the moon looks like, from someone like standing on the moon and looking at Earth. And it's just basically a program that draws lines and dots and paints. It's basic.
And so growing up, you really knew you wanted to be a technologist or in technology somehow.
Yeah, there was a point in time where I wanted to be like a pilot, but yeah, that
everybody wants to be a pilot
everyone
at some
wants
point.
to be, exactly, a doctor or pilot. No, life led me to there.
And then eventually the Army recruited you for 8200.
Correct.
And how'd you feel when you got in?
I was kind of like, what am I doing here? I don't know. Like everyone's like, around me, like weird people, very smart, much smarter than I would assume. And I didn't feel at home much, but
And did they fuel your knowledge, or like how did that impact you, that experience?
Of course. So there's let's go to the extreme. There is no such thing as someone who grew up with 8200 grads and not thinking about starting a startup, because it's such a norm. Like I lived in the same apartment with 2 people. One of them sold a company for $300 million. One of them sold a company for $450 million. That's my standard in life, right? And when you get to when that's your friends, like you.
Can you say who those were?
Yeah. So well, yeah. One of them I'll say, which is someone called Tamir.
Okay.
He's GM of Magic Leap. He sold the Prime Sense to Apple.
Got it.
Well, the other one I prefer not, because it's a bit complicated.
No problem.
But yeah.
So you grew up surrounded by people who first were passionate about technology and then were insistent on wanting to start their own businesses. So coming out of 8200, that was a goal of yours.
Yeah.
You actually, before you got to Crosswise, you started a company called Interactive Tutorials, which actually is still running.
Correct.
Tell us about that.
So, one night I was like frustrated from the fact that people can't just learn how to program in Python. I felt like, I wanted to show people how easy it is. And I was like envisioning a system that you would go in and write like hello world and click the play button, and you wouldn't have to download an interpreter or even figure out like what is an interpreter, and just skip the whole thing and first get you hooked on programming and getting you to actually want to do the hard stuff of scaffolding all the IDEs and interpreters, like all the development environments, and like that stuff isn't really interesting. And that's, I think, is a kind of a very big, it's like a wall, it's
a barrier.
It's a barrier, right?
Yeah.
That just kind of is just makes people like that want to try out programming not I mean, it's hard enough for you to just get demotivated, right? So then you eventually won't even try it, and then you're like, okay, never mind. So, and I really thought that if I would unblock this big thing and just have an like interactive tutorial online, then people, and it would be free, then people would for sure sign up and start coding. It started out in Python only, and it was like very slow. But it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew. And today, just my Python website, I haven't checked for the rest, but just my Python website, there's 350,000 unique visitors per month.
Wow. 350,000 visitors per month that go in and basically take the courses that you designed.
Correct.
To teach them how to program Python.
Yeah. And then there's like other websites as well. Like I started up Java, C, Ruby, PHP, all these programs, like everything, right?
It almost sounds like And that could be a completely different career for you, and your next,
Yeah, well, you never know,
You
right?
never know.
So I got multiple acquisition offers for that, but it was never like, I was
the
never
$300
like,
to $450 million that your roommates were getting.
Yeah, well, not that much, right? But everyone is like, looking at it as assets that they may want to have, but because they're very high ranking in the SEO. Like I'm usually number 1, 2. Around the code academies and the Khan academies and stuff, but very, very high there, high up in Python's for sure number 1 in most of the browsers. You know how it works. It doesn't work the same way from all the countries in the world.
Right. What's the most popular country?
So United States.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's only in English.
It's in English. No, actually, there are languages. So today, people actually translate it and help me to like build the tutorials. It's actually the contents are actually open source. You can actually take them and do whatever you want with them.
Wow.
Yeah.
To focus a little bit on Crosswise, where was the idea from? Who thought of the idea?
Well, I think it was somewhere between Jonathan and Steve, but it's Steve mostly.
That's Steve Glanz and Jonathan Seidner.
So yeah,
co-founders.
So I'll start from the beginning, right? I looked for people to start a company with, and it was a long process. Long story short, I met Jonathan. Actually, we worked in the army together, but I kind of met him again, and like we synced up. The guy who actually told us to meet again was a guy called Yaron Inger, which I don't know if you heard, but just had a mini exit and just made like $60 million from that. And he still owns like the majority of the company.
So that class of 2008 from 8200 probably has a GDP worth of the country probably.
He was my mentor in the army.
Wow.
Like I think very highly of him. Yeah, he's amazing.
So you met Jonathan.
Yeah.
And you were in search of a business.
Correct.
So you knew you wanted to start a business.
Correct.
And what happened then?
And then Jonathan was like, I met him and he told me about, the ad tech world and identities and like the problem of cross device and and how to make money off of identity over the internet. And I was charmed. I was like, amazed by how much I was intrigued by this world, by how techy it is from one hand, and from the other hand, like I felt like I had an opportunity to actually make a difference there, like with the things that I've learned in the army and like my passion, like it was like very high alignment. And I really liked Jonathan. He was like, he's a serious person, right? You meet him, the first thing you think about is like, man, I can rely on him to like work super hard and be super serious about what he's doing, and he's like super.
And I know both of you very well, and clearly your personalities are complementary.
Yeah,
you're not alike. You both bring two very, very different things to the table.
Yeah, I'm more like chilled out,
Yes.
trying to just going with the flow. And he's like, no, we're gonna build this
Detail oriented.
That's how it'll work. We'll have to do this, and like this is a plan. Okay.
And then how did Steve come in?
It.
Yeah, how did Steve come in?
So Steve and Jonathan worked together in My Things. It's a company that was unfortunately closed recently. It's a retargeter. So they do retargeting. And Steve he worked at BizDev there, and he was tasked to find a company that can license their technology to make it possible to do cross-device retargeting.
Got it. What was the problem for our listeners that you were trying to solve?
So the problem is, how do you fix the broken internet in the sense that the devices are kind of siloed to themselves and not interconnected to the persons that actually use them, right?
So I use a desktop, a laptop, an iPad, and an iPhone.
And no one knows that you're the same person, except Facebook, right? So Facebook knows that. Because
I'm logged in on Facebook and all devices, they know it's the same person.
But what happened when you don't log in, right? And that's where Crosswise comes along, and that's where the open internet targeting is where that's where our solution is needed. So all these companies like My Things, so they need a technology to be able to bridge devices that belong to the same person without actually knowing the person beforehand.
A consumer device map.
Correct.
Got it. So the three of you got together. You became enchanted with this idea of cross-device marketing and being the data behind it.
Correct.
Did you guys vet the idea before you launched?
Yeah, well, first of all, we had a strong, say from my things that they would buy it if we had it.
So you had a customer who was willing to pay for it already.
Yeah, and we had some more. There were some talks. The VCs especially had some due diligence done there, right? So they called a few of their friends, that have like companies in the ad tech space, and they asked them like, "Would you do that the same?" And the answer was pretty much, "Yeah, it's a problem. We know, we need it."
And early on, how did you fund the company?
Well, we just started, writing some presentations up, meeting investors.
These are private people or institutions or?
Institutions, VCs, right? That's, we met around 40. And then eventually, November 2013, we got Giza Ventures, which I don't think they invest much anymore. The partner that's there right now that made the investment is called Eyal. He works at Pitango right now.
Okay.
It's Giza. It's Horizon Ventures. It's a very interesting VC fund. Our Crowd.
So Our Crowd is that crowdfunding site company that really actually also an Israeli startup that actually is revolutionizing how you raise money for startups.
Yep, and then we had some more angel investors led by Moshe Lichtman, Sarah Vilf, he was one of them as well.
And this is before you had anything written. This is an idea on a piece of paper, and 3 very good, captains.
Correct. So actually, I had to correct you on something. I was actually not an officer in the army.
Okay,
but.
Well, you look like an officer, so, although you're a little bit laid back for an officer.
Yeah.
No problem.
So we raised $2 million, and then the fund started raising, started hiring people, spending the money, building partnerships with data partners, starting to look for customers around May of the 6 months later. I think.
So you had a product by May?
No, we had a product by September, and September was the first deal that we signed. It was with a company called DataLogix.
Sure.
Which was mysteriously acquired by a company called Oracle about a month later. We were very worried, very concerned that things are going to be, not good for us, for our first customer. Eventually, that was, the path that actually led us to the due diligence that, led Oracle to understand that we're the company that they want to buy.
Wow.
Because they had a strategic understanding of the ad tech space and their needs, and they decided they needed in-house this type of technology.
Oracle, so they became a customer of yours.
Correct. Well, I mean, implicitly, right?
Implicitly, because DealLogic was the original customer, and then they were acquired by Oracle.
Yeah.
How big was that first contract?
Well, our contracts were pretty big, right? So all of them are around the 200-300K per year, wow. Right? Mm-hmm. We actually reached around a $4 million ARR, pretty early on. I think within a year and a half of sales, or even 2.
Within a year and a half, you did
of sales.
Wow.
Like since that, yeah.
And so you grew the company. At what point did you say, this actually might work?
In startups, it's actually, you think about the opposite. You're obsessed with when we're looking for the signs that it's not going to work, and they never came. Well, I don't think they came. They came. Well, there was one point in the life of the company that we actually lost our primary data source, that we thought it's going to end our company's life there.
Tell me about that.
Well, we had a deal with a company. Sorry, it was very, very intensive on them. They eventually just shut us down.
So they provided what to you?
Oh, they provide. So the way the Crosswise works is basically, so we kind of just see a lot of the internet's like browsing activity, and we correlate the browsing activity between all the devices that seem like that they act in a way that are patterns of devices that belong to the same person, right? So you'd look at a pair, right? And, one device would, be interested in sports and would be coming out of the same home and same household, and the other one would also be sports. Then you had the third device that would be interested in Barbies. You would probably say that the first pair makes more sense than the second pair, right? So that's the kind of machine learning that we've built out to maximize the precision of the graph.
How big is the data now? How much data do you guys own?
The number of
devices. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's in the hundreds of millions, right? It's you can get to 70-80% of the population of the US easily, right? I mean, it's actually not that hard to just see the internet, some subset of the internet. It's if you think about it, we browse all day in so many websites, and everyone's trying to monetize on their data, right? And we're there, right? We're the guys you can monetize your data with.
This company, this particular vendor of yours, they shut you down. They shut down the data they were providing.
Yeah. Long story short, we found a solution, and it didn't kill us.
Okay.
But it was very close.
But it was close.
It was close. It was you would not imagine how close it was. But, you need some luck in life, and that's, we always hear, right? You always hear the story of a startup that was almost like that 3 times. So we had that as well. Yeah.
I think not failures, but difficult times, right? Barriers or challenges that test you become very important become very formative events. Not only in the business life, but in the personal life. I mean, going through the hard times is what creates character, not going through easy times in life.
Yeah.
That was the hardest moment of Crosswise when that happened?
Yeah. That was, the whole thing was not easy, right? Because we worked very intensively, very hard. But yeah, I would say it was the hardest.
You build a business, hundreds of millions of devices that you're mapping, which was unique. Nobody else was really doing it at that time.
Well, we had a few competitors, but if you look at Oracle's perspective, we were favorable in both the technology sense, we had the best technology, as well as the type of company that we've built. Because the other 2 companies were more media companies that actually did not well, some of them did they do resell the data, but they were built as a media company. They were built in a way that they actually sell advertising services, right? And though when you're selling advertising services, how can you buy your core technology from another right? So it creates a conflict of interest. So, but that that was one of the reasons that Oracle kind of Oracle just in general is not I'm not gonna say too much on what Oracle's strategic values, but
right.
They're not really interested in going into the media space.
Right, that's a different business altogether. Right?
Yeah, it's a different business. And
knocking on doors, getting advertisers, and
yeah, we want to be the professional data providers, right?
The engine behind the
right.
ads that are served.
Right.
And so basically today, if you open up your phone and you see the same ad that was on your desktop or your iPad, that's all you. That's all.
Well, if you're on the open internet,
yeah,
and you're not using the technology of our competitors,
right,
then it's us.
Got it. So you were building the business, and obviously the company got eventually acquired by Oracle. Were you guys shopping at that point?
Well, the story is that Oracle kind of approached us. They were we were just contemplating the idea, and then we had some more interest in us from several companies, and things just started to heat up naturally, and I think that there comes a point where that people are super serious, and you start getting term sheets, and then the game's on, right? So people understand if they don't give us an offer now, it's not going to happen. So
they're going to lose out on it.
They're going to lose out on it, and I think that's eventually, that's what happened, right? So that it just, we had a different, people.
Did you hire an investment banker for that process, or you represented yourself?
Yeah, we did.
You did,
but it was mostly because we were very inexperienced, and we were so scared.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I have friends of mine who did not, right? And and I appreciate them, but I know I like to. Well, I do prefer to be on the safe side as much as I can.
You were Seidner because so Jonathan's very, very safe, conservative guy.
Wow, yeah,
and Steve, yeah,
both like the three of us. Like, yeah, I'm the least, but still very much, and they're like, they're to the extreme, right? So that was easy for us.
So as the process progressed with Oracle, how did you feel? I mean, it's a little bit bittersweet. You started a company from nothing, you build it into a substantial player in your industry, and then somebody wants to buy it. Mixed feelings?
Well, it's a journey, right? So even today, the journey continues. When you build something, you want to also make sure that you place it on the ground and or on someone else's hands, and he takes care of it and takes over, and then you can move to the next thing. So we're like literally doing it right now, right? We're at the point where we're taking our technology and we're just implementing it somewhere in the organization where we're actually not going to deal with it anymore. And we're actually doing like completely different things right now. So my office today, we're actually working on the core business, the technology, the core platform of ODC, Oracle Data Cloud, which is what's called the audience platform. So we deal with audiences mostly. That's most of our revenue today, and that's what my team does today.
So you guys really did pivot away from what you were doing when you sold the company to a completely different business.
So I was mentioning Data Logics, right? So they're kind of the core identity people in ODC. So the whole project that we've just we're almost finished with is to transfer our knowledge and technology to them. And then it always makes sense to consolidate, right? You don't need like everyone doing ODC is 6 acquisitions. You can imagine how much duplicate efforts are going on around the 6 acquisitions.
I'm sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you have a company that is made out of 6 acquisitions, all you do is merge technologies and issue projects, right?
Did you regret selling when you sold?
No, I don't. Okay. I think Oracle was an excellent choice.
So looking back, if there's one thing you could have done differently in the life of Crosswise, what would it have been?
Well, I would take things even more lightly than I took them, right?
Really?
That's what I would have done.
It was tough being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Emotionally.
Very tough. Very, very
Why?
Tough. You get like, anxiety.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And you get like, and you feel butterflies all day, right? And you just get less healthy, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard.
How many employees, when you sold it, did you manage?
It was I managed around 13 to 15 at the time. I don't remember how much exactly.
And today?
Almost 30.
Who was your most trusted advisor during this process?
Well, the thing is, I had a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And they're all like kind of, helping out in the process of being an entrepreneur. I don't think I can say I had, someone who was my mentor in starting a startup, actually. I'm assuming a lot of people did have such. I did not. I just had friends who started companies like, Tamir, who I mentioned, he started a company. I don't remember when it was acquired, but it was acquired around the time we were acquired. So he was kind of there for me,
Did you have any professional advisors? I mean, accountants, attorneys, obviously we discussed, bankers, but in retrospect, looking at the professionals who work with you.
Well, not really. We had excellent lawyers and, but no, like we didn't really have, except the bankers that, helped us. It was mostly us and like Eyal, right? We had actually another friend of Eyal, like who worked with him, called Gad. Today also works at Pitango. They were like, helping us out in the process. It was they were part of the team, right? We were all like one team.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can really say I had, it was hard. It was kind of alone. Now that I'm thinking about it, I dealt with these things a lot, alone, just with my wife.
Yeah. Spouses could be the greatest support.
Oh yeah,
no doubt about it.
No doubt.
Been there and done that. We've both been there and done that. It's without our wives, forget about it. For future entrepreneurs from around the world who will listen to this podcast, what's the most significant lesson that you can talk about or teach them about what it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur, as a startup person?
I would say that you need to use your relative advantage. And you have to be number one in what you do, because if you're not number one in what you do in the world and you don't know how to get there, it will be very hard for you to succeed massively. I mean, we hear, a lot of success stories, but when you look at the numbers, right, and you look at how many startups actually try, you have a very, very low chance to succeed probabilistically, just because there are so many people who are trying. So I think, using your relative advantage is the number one advice I can give, of something that you need to focus on. Another thing I would say is, don't underestimate how important it is to have good human skills. I think soft skills,
interpersonal skills,
right?
Yeah.
So I think it's, think about how important it is for a startup, multiply that by 10. That's how much important it is. It's important because when you raise money, you need to establish trust with your VCs. When you close deals, when you eventually need to make a good impression on a potential acquirer, when you need to hire people, right? So all these things, if you're not, the best people person that there is out there, then you're not going to be able to close the deal, to hire the person, or sell your company. It's not only about technology; it's also about people.
There's something about the Israeli ecosystem that incubates entrepreneurs and great startups. You've been through 8200, the elite intelligence unit. You're surrounded by friends who have been wildly successful. In your view, what is it about Israel that incubates these people, like you?
So, there's two ways to look at it. One is like to talk about the 8200 network, right, which is amazing, and it's very, there's a psychological, sociological aspect of, being up to par with your friends, and if you're not as good as them, then you're nobody. That's like,
that's interesting. It's like a motivating.
Oh yeah.
Lights fires. Yeah.
You've probably heard. I mean, this is going to be kind of bad, I'm going to say, but there are a lot of suicides in places where there are like the parents are pushing their kids to succeed, like in the Silicon Valley, right? Yeah. There's a lot of high rates of suicide there for kids because they don't want to disappoint their parents, and that's because there's a very high bar, right? Because people kind of try to reach that bar, and I'm saying it I know it's a bad connotation, but I'm actually trying to say that, try to emphasize the importance of social standards, right?
Yeah.
Like this is you grew up in 8200 and that's your friends, and you have to be at least as good as them. And there's this, it's kind of an ego thing, right? So that's one thing, right? And it's very hard, and it's, it's there, it's hard to resist, right? It makes people try. But I think the thing that makes people succeed is something completely different, which is the culture. And the culture, working for almost 3 years now in Oracle, I can say that the main difference between the culture of the American average, manager or engineer or person, whatever, is that they're driven by professionalism. They care about how they look like, they care about how they perceive, and that's what, that's their whole career is by building their perception of what other people think, know, like, value them.
Their
right?
brand, in
their
essence.
brand,
Yeah.
right? They're building their brand throughout their career. Whereas Israelis are much more results driven. No one cares about how they look like. They would usually, wear sandals to work. They would probably stink a bit more than the average American. They don't care about how they look like or how they're being perceived. They care about getting things done. If it's making money, if it's closing the deal, if it's selling their company, that's what they care about, and they'll do everything that they can to get to that point.
If there's something that you would do to improve the ecosystem here, what would you do?
Well, I would do a lot of things. I think what Israel is missing is the what opportunities are there out there in the actual world, in the U.S., in China, in Europe, right? We're missing context on what's really going on, what's important, what is the problem that we should work on, what is the problem that we shouldn't, because it's too small, right?
Too insular.
Meaning insular, we don't have a good perception of the problems and the problems that need to be solved and the big drivers behind money in the world, right? And that's what's kind of missing to the Israeli ecosystem. I think a lot of VCs are trying to solve this by creating growth funds, but it's not enough to find money for growth. You need to fuel the entrepreneurs and push them and I don't think we're doing it really badly. I just think we could do better, right?
I know that you're outspoken a little bit when it comes to politics. I know you have your strong opinions, but do you think there's a role for government in trying to fill that specific hole that you just mentioned?
There are some attempts. I think there are successes as well. I think Israel is, although slow in the bureaucratical sense in terms of government, has some nice ideas, incubators and such.
Chief scientist,
right? And funding. I mean, well, we can improve. I mean, I'm looking at a lot of things, and I'm kind of sometimes a bit disappointed. But I do think that we, relative to other countries, we're in a good place. I mean, we can improve, right?
Everybody can improve.
Everyone can improve.
The day that you stop improving is the day that you shut your doors, because life is too short. Got to improve. Finally, one last question I want to ask you is, what is the one question an entrepreneur should ask themselves before they risk and launch a startup?
Oh, that's an interesting one.
And you thought this was going to be an easy interview.
Yeah. I'll say it this way. I think I can talk. I can give you a 10-minute answer, but I'll say I'll give you the 2-minute one. When an entrepreneur starts a startup, I think he has some sort of fantasy about how his startup's going to look like, which doesn't usually
pan out.
Yeah, and it doesn't. It's not up to par with reality, right? You start up with imagining something, and then you look for success, and sometimes you think that raising money is success, but it's not, right? And you think everything will be fine, but it's not. And you kind of just go with the flow, but you actually need to understand that when you start a company, you need to fully understand what it actually means to start that company. What is a good company that you should have, and not what you're imagining, right? And I think that's kind of missing to a lot of entrepreneurs, like the perception of how their company should be just function. And I think that's one of the reasons that companies in Israel don't succeed, because they're more driven towards what they want to do versus what's really important. I think that's the number one. The number one advice would be to really, really understand. What choice are you making? Are you fully understand? Are you actually what is the field that you're going for? Who are the partners that you want to be with? You actually want to be with them for 7 years? You actually want to hire and manage 30 people? You actually want to be on the plane all day and sell? Is that things you want to is that what you want to do? Because I think that's really where,
and to really consider those things before you even launch. I mean, you need to know what you're getting yourself into,
because a lot of people they might not even actually want to be a founder, right? They may want to just work at some place and have a lot of impact. Okay, so go work for Facebook. You'll move a lot more money from side to side if you work at Facebook and Google rather than, doing your own thing, right? Like starting a company usually is, solving a problem, which is, 1/100th of the scale of what you can do in corporate. It's usually the perception is usually the opposite, where people think that you have more impact by having a startup, but in fact, it's the opposite. Most startups actually, get acquired much before, way before they actually get to a sizable sales and a good product and product market fit even, right? I mean, sometimes it's just, people just hire people and then sell them as, for an acqui-hire. So that's my advice.
Ron Reiter, thank you very much for your time today. I really do appreciate it, and we're looking forward to hearing about interactive tutorials to see where you take that. It's really interesting, and thank you.
No, for sure, no problem.
You've been listening to Startup Stories from the Startup Nation. I'm the host, Yigal Marcus. The associate producers are Moshe Raps and Avi Maklis, and the senior research analyst is Lior Leben. If you have a startup that you think we should feature on air, please email me at yigal.marcus@bernstein.com or at startupstoriesisrael@gmail.com. No good startup in Israel is too big or too small, and in our new upcoming Just Starting Up segment, we'll give entrepreneurs with a big idea the opportunity to bring those ideas to the world. A big, very special thank you to my employer, Alliance Bernstein Investment Management and Research, who has been incredibly supportive of this initiative. And please, share these podcasts with your friends, like us on Facebook, and please, please, please rate us on iTunes. Until next time, thank you for listening.